I used to think the online world was kind of like a dark mirror of the real world. It wasn't an accurate representation, but it was connected. I'm not even sure it's connected anymore.
Hello there, welcome to the Bardo podcast. Today's guest is John Higgs, one of my favourite writers of ever, and he's the author of books on David Lynch, William Blake, James Bond and the Beatles, Doctor Who, the KLF, the band that burnt £1 million, Robert Anton Wilson, one of my favourites, Timothy Leary, among many others. He's a great author. Very excited for this conversation. John normally writes, I'd say, about strange ideas and characters on the edges of culture that somehow find themselves weaved through the mainstream in surprising narratives. They're really interesting books. In this conversation, we talk about David Lynch and meditation, we talk about creativity, counterculture, the internet, synchronicities, reality tunnels, and how not to fall for your own bullshit. My name is Marc Salmon. I'm a comedian and a practicing Buddhist. It needs a lot of practice. I've also spent much of my working life in adult social care. And the Bardo podcast is a podcast about comedy, spirituality, culture, and how to think a little bit more clearly in these confusing and ridiculous times. I think you will enjoy this one. So let's sit back, relax, float downstream as we enter the Bardo. Well, I guess I wanted to get a bit of a picture of, because a lot of your work, you're dealing with people, maybe outsider figures, Discordianism, the KLF, Robert Anton Wilson, David Lynch, people who I guess would resist straightforward explanations. And I was wondering what drew you first into these kind of imaginative ways of looking at reality. Was there a moment for you where I guess the rational consensus world didn't feel sufficient, or how did that come about?
Oh gosh, that's a big question. I mean, it came about. My first book was about Timothy Leary, but that was just one of those weird quirks of happenstance that I became friendly with a guy who had been on the run with Timothy Leary when he was in Algiers and when he was in Switzerland. And he would just tell all these stories, I was thinking, these stories are amazing. My God, someone should really, write a book about Timothy Leary. I can't believe no one's doing it. Why don't they do it? And then you keep hearing Leary mentioned in the culture, and you go, you've got the context wrong. That's not what it was about. And then a few years of this, the sort of the dawning realization that was like, oh, it's me. I'm this person who's supposed to write this book. Oh, it took me a long time to realize that. So I sort of ploughed on, so it wasn't a sort of, I set out to write about, countercultural things. And I think, I kind of write about things that are important to mainstream culture. It's just the ideas always start off out in the fringes, out on the edges. So if you want to, understand something, you've got to sort of leave the sort of the bland middle and go into the more interesting wilderness to sort of find out how it came to be and why it exists and what was, what impulses were sort of pressing it. So it's, I feel I write as much about culture as I do counterculture. I don't really like to split them.
Yeah, yeah, and your approach, so even with very mainstream things like the Beatles and Bond, you
Yeah.
split it into the Eros and Thanatos. So you're
Yeah.
you're approaching mainstream things with this. Was you always kind of interested in let's say maybe the esoteric way of looking at things? Was there something that made you realize that the world was a bit stranger than you thought it was?
Well, the world is a bit stranger than we think it is. I think
Yeah.
I don't think it's. I don't think there's anyone who looks at the sort of the mainstream and goes, well, that sums up life perfectly. I don't need anything more than that. That sort of captures what it's all about. I think everyone, feels other impulses and feels that there's more going on than you see on the BBC or whatever. It's I don't think I'm that unusual in that. Maybe I'm unusual in the people who usually get to write books are in a sort of more comfortable are from more comfortable backgrounds. So they're happy with it. They're sort of happy with the sort of mainstream. That's just the finances of publishing where, you know, you get the amount of times I've been to literary festivals and they go, we'll get the writers together for a meal. And you're just waiting for the first one to start talking about how their Airbnb is doing, because they're all landlords.
Yeah, of course.
They all need this extra source of income to sort of support writing. So it's once you realise that, then you go into, you know, Waterstones and you look at the books available to you and you go, yes, that's the books all the landlords would write.
I think it's similar in comedy as well. So
yeah, very much so. It's in all the art forms. It's a real issue. It's a real problem, because people who are comfortable enough to be able to do these things are quite happy with the status quo. Mm-hmm. You know, it works okay for them. Mm-hmm. They aren't pushing to change things. You know, when you look at, I don't know, punk or even jazz or heavy metal or rap, particularly reggae, all these things came from people who would be quite happy just to sort of overturn the existing system and do something better, you know, which you don't quite get with, you know, One Direction or Coldplay or Ed Sheeran or something like that.
So moving on to people that are... So you wrote a really good piece. I told you, I think when I emailed you originally, your new moon articles, which is part of your Substack, and it was about the counterculture. And I was in Brighton last weekend for the Brighton Fringe, and
excellent, yeah.
Something I noticed that the people there were very friendly, and I was like, wow, Brighton's really nice. And I said to someone, why are you so nice? And they said, because London, everyone's very career, performance happening. Everything's like, I'm doing this. It felt a bit more grounded. I don't know if that's like a utopian view of Brighton, but that's maybe how bad London's got.
I recognise what you're saying, definitely. You know, I've lived in Brighton since 2002. Lived here longer than anywhere else. It really suits me. I really love it here. I accept it's not for everyone. It is unusual in the southeast for its politics and things like that. But when I first got a job down here, I was living in Tufnell Park, so in London. So I had the reverse commute, where I'd leave London and go to Brighton until we moved down, and it was just the difference of people at Victoria Station in London and Brighton Station at the other end. It was like there was just a weight off people when you got down to the coast, and it was so noticeable. And I just thought, this would work. This would work for me.
Yeah,
this would work for me. And you know, it's the whole point of Brighton is it's a town you're supposed to come and visit and have a good time. You know, it's a tourist town. We want people to come here and enjoy themselves as much as possible. So when that's your general attitude, it's accepting, and you want people to, you're going to be friendly. You know.
So, but in at the beginning of your Lynch book, you dedicate the book to the East Sussex Psychedelic Film Club.
I did, yes, that's right.
And and then also in the New Moon article, you talk about that as well, about how these spaces perhaps create a refuge from algorithmic culture. And do you think is that somewhere then that you've deliberately set up so people can experience things rather than performing them, if you get what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly some performance involved in it. You know, we've had musicians and comedians as part of it every now and again. Yeah, film is the main thing, obviously, and there's a setup in the second room, as we called it. It's done in this chapel, this 17th century chapel which Tom Paine used to live at. But there's another room which is equally as big, where we can put a bar and we can do a merch table, and our mate Chris does all these projections, all these real sort of old school oil lamps everywhere, and Richard Norris, who's one of the people I do it with, who was in the Grid and you know, everything else in electronic music, he can DJ and things like that, and it's more meeting people there in the interval and beforehand, and the conversations, and the like-minded people sort of getting together, and you never see anyone pull out a phone in these things.
Yeah.
It's just great, and every single one is sold out. Even when we go, right, no one's ever heard of this film, we're gonna force people to watch this 1970s Polish science fiction thing. And if we were sensible, we'd move it to a bigger venue and sell more tickets, or branch it out to other sort of places. But we're not sensible. We ain't doing it for the numbers.
Yeah.
It's the right amount of people that it's not crowded. It's just a nice getting together. We're very, very proud of it, really. We're very happy with what we've done. And I think if we were, chasing metrics, chasing money, chasing brand awareness or anything like that, it just wouldn't be special in the way that I think it is.
And again, in that article, you wrote about how subjective experience perhaps might be the new counterculture. So not chasing metrics. Maybe that's. Is that a correct understanding? Do you think protecting subjective experience is what the counterculture might be now?
It's that's a nice way of looking at it. The way I argued, if my memory's right, is that obviously the counterculture is counter to the mainstream culture. It's not a subculture which just exists apart. It's a challenge to the core values of the mainstream culture, and the mainstream culture, I think, now is kind of the algorithm, and it is metrics, and it is numbers. So anything that sort of avoids the algorithm and hides from the online world and doesn't really exist in the online world is, for me, by definition, counterculture. And the huge rise in interest in sort of folk related things, of people just sort of getting out into fields and visiting stones and Morris dancing and the music and things like this that is happening all over, it's very much not the online world. It's people escaping the online world to go out and do things. So most of what I think as countercultural stuff is kind of invisible to the mainstream. I kind of think that anything that's not on X is probably counterculture, and how that must, Elon Musk must hate that because he wants to be the cool kid.
Yeah.
Right. But he's, by definition, anything connected to him is never going to be that. It's an interesting time. You look online, it seems so grim and hopeless, and then you sort of leave your house and walk out the door, and extraordinary things happen, and you have very memorable experiences with really interesting people. That's all. It's a world of comedy and music and romances and families and children, and there's a world with dogs in it. It's got dogs and cats and things like that in it. It's quite a world, but you just don't get that from the online.
No, and I would like it if kids all started Morris dancing. I think that would be nice. That was the next thing.
Yeah, I think they'd quite enjoy it.
Yeah.
It's the whacking with sticks.
Yeah.
It's like the real sort of, border Morris, or the real violent whacking with sticks.
Exactly.
That I think would appeal to them.
Yeah, you could sublimate aggression. Like if you had any aggressive kids, get them with the sticks out there whacking them against each other, get the bells on.
Yeah.
Something that you said as well that resonated with me is that remembering that the internet is mostly bullshit, which is difficult to remember. We get so sucked in.
Yeah. The thing that did it for me was writing a book about Doctor Who.
Yeah.
And when I first told people I'm writing a book about Doctor Who, the amount of people who went, "Oh, you're brave," was quite noticeable. And it was people who were into Doctor Who and also people who had no interest in Doctor Who. The general sense from the online world was that the Doctor Who world was just horrible, was very, very strong. And then I go out and sort of toured this book, and it came out just as the last series started, and I toured it for a couple of months. And I'd meet all these people, and they were uniformly lovely. it was just such a nice time. And there was this mad thing in culture, and they just loved it, and you loved it too, and it was just really, really special, and it's so different to the online world. I used to think the online world was kind of like a dark mirror of the real world. You know, it wasn't an accurate representation, but it was connected. I'm not even sure it's connected anymore. It sort of bubbled away. It's like picking on Elon Musk again, but you know, if ever he tweets about London, it's a city that is in no way connected to the city of London that people of London walk around and know. It's this weird thing in his head that's just not London. It's just
Yeah.
he's just the connection has gone, and it, you know, he's been pushed into some weird, dark, paranoid fantasy world that's horrible. Why would you want to live in, you know, Elon Musk's mind when you could walk around the real London? And it's just an odd thing.
Do you think?
It's hard to escape the online world, though. That's the problem. You know, it's easy to dismiss it, but most people, to earn a living and, you know, survive, and need to be connected to it to some point. It's a real luxury, a real privilege to like just go, oh, I'm not online. You know,
Yeah.
Very few people can get away with doing that. But I can see it as being a real aspirational thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I guess we're not wanting to like become Luddites and deny, you know, all technology. There's, you know, there's many uses to it.
Yeah. Bearing in mind that the Luddites were actually right.
Right. Yeah.
You know, their complaints that this technology is going to, you know, ruin our livelihoods was
Yeah.
absolutely spot on.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I fear sometimes that this notion of augmented reality. So if you're talking about Elon Musk's dark paranoid version of reality, what happens when his reality starts to encroach upon our bodies? Maybe if we're having like wearable technology and things like that.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's 'cause it's easy to say, "Oh, just don't use it," you know.
Yeah.
And I don't think I would use it, but it's that Rushkoff's idea of reverse centaur. Are you familiar with this phrase?
No, I know Rushkoff. I don't know that. Yeah.
When AI was being sort of pushed or promoted, an example often used is, particularly in the world of chess, as centaurs, which is half human, half AI, where instead of just getting AI to play chess against each other, which no one's interested, a human with an AI would go against another human with another AI. So it's like a enhanced human sort of competing, stuff like that. And in that scenario, the human is in control and the AI is their tool, you know. It's like they're the head of the centaur and the AI is the horse, so they can go faster. That's the idea. But in reality, in, you know, late stage capitalism, if you're delivering parcels or something like that, you know, it's the opposite way around. You're the person doing all the running round, driving like crazy, hitting the targets, while the AI is controlling you and forcing you to do this in 38 seconds and then deliver that in 28 seconds, and do, you know, you can have a toilet break in 45 minutes, and, or, you know, the way companies like Amazon just control their workers through algorithmic sort of control. The whole thing's upside down, and the whole thing is just, it's hellish, really. It's just, you know, no way to spend your brief years on this, you know, this marvelous globe.
And unfortunately, like in my own experience, I noticed myself, I guess, reverse centauring myself, like in my thinking, because the more, you know, especially if you're trying to create stuff, you do have to be aware of like numbers. You start to quantify things in these metrics more. And there's a
Yeah,
sort of maybe an act of violence upon myself where I think it was Foucault, and he spoke about how punishments evolved over time. And so originally you would have the king would put you on a rack and literally stretch out your body.
yeah,
And then it came to the point where, with this idea of the panopticon, that you're being watched at all times, then you have like an internal policeman who there's no one actually even watching you, but you feel like you're being watched. So it modifies
yeah,
your behavior. And then that led to like us carving up time. Instead of the body, we now carve up time, and everything's so scheduled. And so metrics is like carving up our life world in a sense. And I notice I'm doing it more and more, chasing numbers and invalidating pure experience for this
Yeah.
hellish robotic sort of overlay.
Yeah. But the numbers can only measure what numbers can measure.
Yeah.
For instance, it's quite, you know, all the advice would be to, if you're doing something online, would give you all this advice to push to something that will, you know, be seen by so many million people. You know, you want something that goes massive, except that, you know, a million people will sort of see it and go, well, that's a thing,
Yeah.
and then just sort of move on and have no connection to you or no interest to you. Whereas if you can get thousands of people to be moved,
Yeah.
and, you know, and feel that's made my life better, like I trust that person, I want to know more about that person, I'll pay attention to what that's doing, that's sustainable. That means you can sort of keep going. You know, a very shallow connection to millions of people is worth less than a trusting deep connection to a much smaller amount. But metrics can't measure that.
No.
They don't measure that at the moment.
No.
So it's measuring all the wrong things, you know, the things that sort of don't matter.
Yeah.
And pushing you. It's, you know, it's like in education when they put more and more measurements that teachers have to hit. So they just teach people to get the measurements rather than teach people, you know, about the subject. And it's on paper, on numbers, it's better, but it isn't. You know, in the real world, it's not. It's far worse.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the pushing aspect of it is like it's so forceful. And so I think over the last couple of months I've started to think of it more like I guess the Taoist way, which is like, you know, just do your work and put it out there. But if you're trying to force this work onto people, it's of course going to have shallow connection because
Yeah,
it's not.
and you know, no one wants to hear it, but you just got to be good.
Yeah, that's
You've got to
true.
make the work better. You know, when you're competing against the entire world. You know, if I'm to write a book that's
Yeah.
going to go into Waterstones, it's sitting there with all the greatest books ever written for the past so many centuries, and it's priced the same. You know, and you've got to be competing, you know, with that. So you've got to, you know, get better. You've got to do another pass, give it another polish, just improve it that little bit. It's a very fine line between something that's good enough and, you know, something that has an afterlife and matters. It's very, very fine line. And you always trying to push up and get better and better and be worth people's time, basically.
How long does it normally take you to write a book on average, would you say?
Probably about a year,
Okay.
18 months for, say,
Yeah.
100,000 word book, something like that. You know, it would be nice if I had the luxury of spending 2 or 3 years on something. I think that would be very, very pleasant, but alas, I have to keep going.
Yeah. Hello there. Just a quick pause to let you know that if you're enjoying the Bardo podcast and you'd like to help support us financially, you can do so at patreon.com/the Bardo podcast. There's a link in the show notes. It takes quite a lot of time to organize, research, edit, and make these. And so any financial help really does support this, so keep it going. So I do appreciate to those who are doing so already. Thank you so much. It means a lot. Right, let's get back to the conversation. So your newest book was Lynchian, which was really great. I enjoyed it very much. And
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that was an unusual one. That was just a mad couple of months.
oh, really?
To
It
do
just
that,
kind of
yeah.
because it is a shorter. In fact, for fans of Discordianism, it's actually 23 chapters, which I quite enjoyed.
I wondered if anyone would pick up on
Yeah,
that.
and I was walking along as I was reading it. I was walking along the River Lee, and there's an art walk. I think it's called the Line, and I saw a text installation. It was a Fellini quote, and it said that dreams are a language made of images. In cinema, every object and light means something, as in a dream. And then I looked down and I saw a trolley, a shopping trolley, like half submerged in the mud, and next to it was a swan. and I thought it felt very Lynchian because it was kind of ugly and
Yeah.
beautiful at the same time. And
Yeah.
I wonder, because you write about that in the book, and I wonder what is it, do you think, about Lynch's imagery that kind of bypasses a rational analysis, works more in sort of dream logic and speaks to something deeper in us?
Yeah, I mean, I think the book's more about the fact that it does that rather than trying to explain that.
Yeah.
You know, it's very comfortable with leaving the sort of mystery. It was really when he died last January that it was. In fact, it was the outpouring of affection for him when he died that was just a little bit overwhelming. It was just so large and so ongoing. For someone who couldn't get a film greenlit for the last 19 years of his life, it was a strange little disconnect there, and it was the shrines, the public shrines, that I think really convinced me to write this book. Like particularly outside Bob's Big Boy Burgers in Bob's Big Boy in Burbank. There's this plastic mascot, looks like a Nintendo guy, very bright and shiny, and people would, which is in David Lynch lore, he went to a Bob's Big Boy every day at the same time and had the same milkshake and had the same thing. And so people were leaving obviously flowers, but also donuts and like logs and owls and coffee and an awful lot of cigarettes for a guy who died of emphysema. It was a choice. But I was just struck by the thought that filmmakers don't get public shrines. When our most respected, admired, beloved filmmakers die, when Denis Villeneuve dies, when Christopher Nolan dies, people will be, oh, that's terrible. They're not going to be going out into the streets and building shrines to them. To do that for someone you've never met, they must have had a real impact on you. It happens with David Bowie. It happens with Princess Diana. For this one particular filmmaker who was not seen as a commercial thing by Hollywood at all. He wanted nothing to do with him. But the one filmmaker making films that affected people so deeply that they'd go out into the streets and build a shrine to them. I thought, oh no, that's interesting. That needs to be explored a little bit. That was the impulse behind that book, I think.
And so this shrine had, as you said, donuts. Lynch was known for these sort of ordinary objects, wasn't he? Like cherry pie and coffee was a big thing as well.
Yeah.
And I wonder,
pleasures. These things are little pleasures. Yeah.
And he had a sort of idyllic vision in some sense of sort of small town America, but also there was a fear underneath it. Do you think how do you think his work functions in that interplay between the two, between the kind of ordinary life and then this sort of force underneath it, this darkness that is present?
Yeah. I mean, he had this very small town American Republican upbringing, and all his fears are sort of the small town conservative fears of the unknown, really. There's something in the darkness that's so incomprehensible that your entire worldview will be annihilated if it comes into contact with it. It's not fear of something that you understand that's going to get you. It's fear of something that you can't understand. That's that you'll never be the same again after you sort of encounter it. And because he was so comfortable and particularly with all the meditation, where everyone who you speak to or people who met him, they just see him as this very joyful, positive person who was entirely in the moment, always incredibly focused on them, really paying attention to people, really sort of absorbed in the moment in a way that was fun and warm and positive, and yet he was the guy who would go so far into the darkness, far darker than anyone else, because that's the world of our minds. That's a truthful explanation of exploration, of who we are and what existence is like. There was no sugarcoating anything. He's a curious, fascinating man, and every time you go back to one of his films, it improves in your estimation. It goes up in your thing, which is a sign that that's art. That's real art. That stuff sort of matters. So all these films, even if they weren't successful when they came out, they're still being screened now. They're still being shown in cinemas because people are turning up for them in a way they're not turning up for a lot of films that are being offered to us.
And I think that you say about his meditation practice is something that perhaps was able to give that sense of love to the darkness, because it isn't just about darkness, is it? David Lynch's films.
No, it's because he started meditating halfway through making Eraserhead, his first film, which took about 5 years or something crazy. And if you look at the original script, which you can find online, it's very, very bleak, and then ends very, very sort of bleak.
Yeah.
And I don't think if he'd have made that exactly as it was, we'd still be talking about it, 50 years later. I don't think he'd have had a career. And he started meditating halfway through, and he realised that beneath everything, beneath the surface of all our choppy emotions or something like that, there was just this bliss, that was the sort of the foundation of the world. And then he started to change the Eraserhead, and this character, the lady in the radiator, who just sort of represents goodness, warmth, sort of a lovely thing, came into the film. He just stares at this in this sort of bleak industrial horror world. His warmth as a radiator is just good. It's just a good thing. And there's a spirit there. That's this lady, and she sings these really innocent but truthful little songs to him, and the end of the film, he sort of comes to her, and it's easy to interpret another character who's pulling all these levers as like a character represents fear, the Mandarin, and so as well as the fear, there's also love in his world, and time again in the films, particularly the ones he writes himself, something transcendent just appears at the end. Whether that's the robins in Blue Velvet or the angel in Fire Walk with Me, or even in Wilder Heart, the good witch, sort of appears at the end, which is why I think. That's why I think things like Twin Peaks affected people in the way they did, because it wasn't just about the murder of a woman.
Yeah.
It was a murder of a woman in a town where there was coffee and donuts and good people and community and beauty and things like that, and lovely music and strange comic madness, and it was just people wanted to be in that world, because people making television at that point did not recognize simple pleasures as being worthy of their scripts. There was, whatever television was being made in the early 90s or the late 80s, they weren't stopping to just go, oh, this cherry pie is just the best cherry pie.
Yeah.
And have some ice cream on the cherry pie and all that sort of stuff. And people reacted to that because that is what life is.
I've been actually rewatching Twin Peaks on Mubi, and
Oh, great.
we watch it. Me and my partner watch it before bed, and I'm looking forward to bed now because it's just you want to be in that world, don't you?
Definitely. Where? How far into it are you?
We are episode 8 of series 1.
Oh,
So
wow.
we've
Oh, my
gone. We
God,
started
yeah.
from the start again, and we're going to go through.
Yeah.
And it's just Cooper, because it's also about friendship as well, and it's about so many things, isn't it? And
Yeah,
from
definitely.
these kind of 1950s sort of, but also timeless feeling, small
Yeah.
town objects, but then also the esoteric. It's got lots of strange concepts. Lots of things from Tibetan Buddhism, from
Yeah.
theosophy. It's
Yeah, because a detective is supposed to be like Sherlock Holmes, like
yeah.
absolutely rational, materialistic and sort of rational. And Dale Cooper is just the opposite.
Yeah.
It's about dreams, it's about the imagination, it's about that thing where he throws rocks to see like almost like an I Ching sort of patterns in the real world to give him clues. It's he's almost like an anti-detective, as they traditionally are. Yeah, it's a wonderful thing. Twin Peaks: The Return is one of the greatest pieces of work of the 21st century in my mind. Just in the ambition of this, basically an 18-hour film, which is really what it is, made with a reasonable budget, with this vast cast. At the very end of his life, or very near the end of his life, but he still had the energy to make this thing that was so. If you look at things like Series 3, Episode 8, no one is going to come close to that.
Yeah.
For decades, surely. I can't imagine anyone coming close to anything like that particular episode.
And as he was making it, it wasn't without difficulty either. There's that video of him getting angry on set, but you said he's very absorbed in things, but he struggled with anger. I think he was quick to anger, but
This is why he started meditating in the first place, was to deal with his anger.
Yeah.
And it's the meditation. It doesn't make all that stuff go away, but it stops it sticking. It stops it lingering. It stops it building up. Anger arises, but then it sort of passes. It's that it doesn't sort of grow into that sort of toxic. Like he did this cartoon, The Angriest Dog in the World, which he did it for many years. It was just four drawings, and they changed the words on it on every one, and the words were nothing to do with the pictures, which was this furious dog, and this dog is just steeped in anger, and he's frozen. He can't sort of do anything, and the world just goes on without him. It's just it's something he recognized in himself, definitely.
And something else that he spoke about is the unified field. That so he had this idea of this underneath, or maybe not underneath. I'm not sure if it's transcendent, but within everything is this unified field. And he often used fishing metaphors for ideas. So rather than inventing them, he was going fishing. And something you've spoken about elsewhere in your work, I reread the KLF book as well before this podcast, which was, and oh, by the way, another nice synchronicity. I was reading it and also listening to the audiobook, and it got to what I'd consider the crux of the book, where you say between the rational and the kind of magical way of thinking about the world. And you said, so what are we to make of that? And at that point, I looked at the audio book and it said there was 23 minutes left. So that was a nice, that was a nice moment.
I didn't know that, but on some level, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, it was great.
That sounds about right for that book.
Hello there, quick break to let you know that I've started a small online meditation group on the 2nd and 4th Sundays. No experience necessary, all are welcome. We've done a couple so far, they've been very, very nice. Lovely way to start a Sunday, very wholesome. I'm going to be starting that back up again now. So if you'd like to join, you can find me at Instagram at Marc Salmon Comedy, send me a message, or find me through the Patreon, patreon.com/the Bardo Podcast. You can join as a free member or as a paid supporter. Also, before we get back to the conversation, we're about to discuss Robert Anton Wilson, the KLF, Alan Moore's Idea Space, Discordianism. If those names are unfamiliar, don't worry too much. Robert Anton Wilson was a hugely influential counterculture writer, one of my heroes, who explored consciousness, belief systems, and what he called reality tunnels. If you'd like to learn more about him, I recommend episode 5 of this podcast with Gabriel Kennedy. We talk about the lives and ideas of Robert Anton Wilson. And you'll also hear us discussing Alan Moore's Idea Space. It's a metaphor for the world of imagination and culture, where ideas connect, evolve, and sometimes seem to take on a life of their own. One more bit of context as well. We're talking about the KLF2. The KLF, one of the most successful and strangest bands in British music history. They had like worldwide #1s and then deleted their entire back catalogue and later burnt £1 million in cash. And they still don't really know why they did it. So right, let's get back to the conversation. So, but with Alan, you speak about Alan Moore's idea space in that, which is something he speaks about a lot.
Oh, yeah.
This idea that ideas are almost autonomous things, I guess, when it's discovered. Do you think that there's a similarity between the unified field and idea space?
It's certainly a similarity between Lynch's notion of catching the big fish.
Yeah.
Where he views, consciousness as like a lake. And if you go into the lake, you'll find all these ideas sort of swimming around, and they're kind of like common ideas, easily caught ideas, pretty shared ideas, really. Most people could get them. And it was the role of the artist to go deeper and deeper into this lake of imagination and find those strange, weird things that live near the bottom with, like little lights on their heads and strange fangs, and to catch those things that people have never seen before and just sort of bring them up and then just sort of present them to the audience. He always saw what he did as being more like a chef who just sort of caught the fish and presented it as best he could, rather than someone who actually built and constructed the work of art or the film. It was, for him, there's always something out there that he had to sort of capture and deliver, rather than something that he would just sort of build and create. That's very similar to Alan Moore's idea space idea, the notion that I think with things like Alan's idea space, they're really useful because there aren't any sort of other models of the imagination and of the immaterial world of culture to go for. I think they kind of needed sort of ideas like that to make sense of what we do, because culture and stories and ideas, they're very easy to dismiss as things that they're not real, but the amount of our lives that we dedicate to the immaterial is massive. If we get free time, we finish work, we could do anything. We'll probably watch a box set or put on Netflix, or watch a film, or listen to an audio book, or get a story fix in some way. We're kind of addicted to these things. They really are important parts of life, and ways to understand them are most welcome, I guess.
How would you, just for people who might not know what idea space is, how would you describe that? Would you be able to take a stab at that?
Yeah. Oh, yes. I nearly did that earlier. Sorry. It's Alan and Steve Moore, his friend Steve Moore, came up with this sort of metaphorical idea of idea space to represent the world of the imagination. And the idea is we all have a little part of this world. It uses a lot of physical sort of metaphors. Ideas are on the tip of our tongue or the back of our minds, or it's a place. They turned it into a sort of a physical space, and we have our own small patches, like our own little homes, that have our personal things. But if we go further out, we'll find things that are shared by everyone, such as the idea of, I don't know, Napoleon or Marilyn Monroe, or things that or Darth Vader, things that sort of everybody knows, and things are connected differently in idea space to the real world. So that, say, Land's End and John O'Groats in the real world are physically far apart, but because of that, they're very, very close in the world of the imagination. And it's what Alan particularly is interested in is the notion that certain ideas who live in this idea space become so complex, so rich, that to all intents and purposes they're basically alive. They sort of behave as they want to, almost, which is a really interesting way of looking at ideas, I think. It's obviously a metaphor, we don't confuse this with the reality of what goes on inside our heads, but it's as a model for understanding it is kind of useful to think of the really complex ideas of having a mind of their own and going about their own business, because that sort of reflects what happens in the real world far better than just dismissing them as just vapid mental constructs or something like that.
Yeah, and so in his book, Bumper Book of Magic, I think it's called Bumper Book of Magic.
Oh, yes,
it's fantastic.
yes.
There's such a great essay at the start about this, and everything is created through mind, and these. So he, as you said, he uses geographical kind of metaphors. So he'll talk about big ideas being like a mountain, I think, and then there's and this is similar to Lynch as well, where the way that he would say, he would talk about shallow ideas and, as you said, catching the big fish. Yeah. Bringing it back to Lynch, because I wonder, something I really liked in your book, there was an interpretation of Blue Velvet where you said that Jeffrey Beaumont and Frank Booth both almost feel like two halves of Lynch himself.
Yeah.
The underworld and the decency existing.
Yes, I think so. Because a lot of people pick on the fact that Jeffrey Beaumont, who's played by Cal MacLachlan, is essentially playing Lynch.
Yeah.
They're both from a small Midwestern town. They both have that sort of, almost goofy positivity about them, and yet they're both, drawn to investigating, mystery and darkness. To the extent that Cal MacLachlan started buttoning up his shirt at the top button of his shirt, because that's how Lynch dressed. So he's dressing a lot like sort of Lynch, But also Dennis Hopper's Frank Booth, you notice, also has that top button done, and can easily be seen as the dark side of David Lynch, as much as Cal MacLachlan is the sort of light side. And from that point of view, then you get the story of the positive, the light person investigating the dark and being confronted with their own sort of darkness. So it sort of work very nicely on a psychological, almost Jungian level, if you view it in those terms. And there's thousands of other ways of viewing it. That's the beauty of the art of David Lynch. But I found that one quite useful.
Yeah. And with Lynch, he does contain these dualities. You can see he has this sort of mystical depth, right? But then there is also the everyday and the enthusiasm for the everyday.
Yeah.
And so it got me thinking about sincerity. And so,
yes.
So with Metamodernism, which you've written about before as well, and The Future Starts Here, where there's this notion of ironic sincerity. I feel like Lynch was a very sincere person. He didn't
very sincere. Yeah, absolutely. It almost wouldn't occur to him to lie or deny anything. Even to the extent that he, being raised in the 50s, he had that sort of golly gosh sort of peachy keen way of speaking. And a lot of his contemporaries were the same. They came from small towns and were like that, but then they got away to California in the 70s and the 80s, and they rejected all that side of themselves as hokey. That's embarrassing. That's hokey. I've matured now. I don't do that anymore. Lynch saw no reason to deny that sort of side of him. He just stayed who he was, having no interest in denying any aspect of himself. It's a fascinating thing about him. Yeah, it's easy to criticize him because of this, because of the way that he comes from this very sort of white background, and his casts are very, very white, and there's a very sort of Republican sort of fear of the working class. It's very obvious in his sort of work, and as it gets on, they sort of get dirtier and dirtier, so it's almost blackface, and they're just terrifying to people. These figures in his films, but it's just who he was who he was, and he did not change, and so you see, the good and the bad. There was no mask, there was no pretense that he was this saintly figure. And although some people do try to portray him as this sort of wonderful sort of saintly figure, he was too honest about who he was for that to really stick. And I think there's something very admirable about that level of honesty. I don't think it's a bad thing.
No, I think it's actually radical. I think that this sort of spiritual persona that sometimes people might project, or different things like that, is no reflection on reality. So, to be free is, I think, to be fully honest with who you are, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. He did. I think that sums him up really nicely.
Yeah.
It's slightly the drunk fool Taoist character. Sort of, he's just as seen as very admirable by the Taoists. That's who he was on some level.
Yeah. So returning to idea space then, and you said it's a useful model for having a sort of mental landscape, right? I think that could bring us on a little bit to Robert Anton Wilson, who I'm a huge fan of, and I think that's how I first encountered your work. I went to a talk on Robert Anton Wilson and Stranger Than We Can Imagine, your book, and it was in Whitstable, and I was there. And I remember I asked you a question about Robert Anton Wilson at the time. I can't remember what it was, but you answered it well, if I remember correctly. I can't remember what it was. I was impressed with it.
I'd probably be very, very happy to be asked about Robert Anton Wilson in the Whitstable Labour Club. Everything's right with the world at that point.
So you met him in 1995, was it?
No, it was later than that.
Oh, right.
I won it. When did he die? 2011, was it? It was when I was writing the Timothy Leary book, so it'd be about 2004, maybe.
Okay. Yeah. How was that encounter?
It was wonderful. It was great. I was quite nervous because, I'd just decided I was going to write a book about Timothy Leary, but I'd never written anything before.
Okay.
So I was a fraud.
You worked in children's TV,
I
right?
worked in children's television. Yeah, absolutely. And, I thought I'm going to get sort of found out. And because he was so, I knew in my head he was so insightful and so smart. He would totally see through me in a second. And I met him, and he totally saw through me in a second, and wasn't in the slightest bit bothered, and just embraced me and accepted me and answered all my questions, and it was just it made such a positive sort of impression on me that he just had the way he accepted me when I was just bluffing it. He was a really lovely guy. I thought
that's amazing.
I have a very happy memory of that evening with him. His legs weren't good, and he had health issues and stuff like that. But his mind was absolutely sharp, and spent a lot of times talking about the Goons and Peter Sellers.
Okay, nice.
Than anything useful, but
Yeah, he was a huge fan of like surrealist, like the Three Stooges and Monty Python, surrealist comedy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, in fact, he had film nights where people would go around his place and watch films, and it was that I want to say was it Peter Rush? What was the name of that guy? There's a film about Peter Sellers.
Mhm.
Someone Rush. That he's in the Pirates of the Caribbean. It'll come to me the
Jeffrey
moment.
Rush.
Jeffrey Rush.
Yeah.
That's right. It was that film where Jeffrey Rush plays Peter Sellers, and the film just sort of skips over the goons at the start. That doesn't matter. That's irrelevant. So I was trying to make the point that no, that's that's the important stuff. That was the stuff that really came out of nowhere after the war and really changed us out in such a great way.
And so Raw wrote about model agnosticism, so multiple model
Yeah.
agnosticism, which has,
Yeah.
I imagine, been a big influence on yourself.
Oh, massive! Absolutely. That's my sort of go-to approach before I write to anything. Certainly, the William Blake book
Yeah.
was absolutely written from a point of multiple model agnosticism, because a lot of the Blake world, people that see Blake stuff, they're drawn to it, but it's like they can't quite get into it because it's kind of like protected by people who have a much more sort of fundamentalist view of who he is, and there's something not welcoming about it. So that was very much using multiple model agnosticism to sort of welcome people to Blake and say, look, if you're a Christian, you're going to see stuff that means that works for you. If you're an atheist, you're also going to see stuff that makes a lot of sense to you. If you're a Gnostic, if you're a Taoist or whatever, you're gonna recognize things in this, and they're all valid. They're all absolutely valid.
Have you? I imagine you've been to the Blake mosaics in Lambeth.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I have.
lovely.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, they are really lovely. Yeah, it's lovely to see things like that around. There's no statues of Blake anywhere, but there's a number of places where his words are sort of carved into the ground. Like on Primrose Hill.
Yeah.
They've carved his words into that there, or on his grave marker. There's lines, and that feels much more fitting to sort of carve his words into stone, into the ground, rather than put him up on a pedestal to sort of admire him for that. And things like underpasses with mosaics, and it feels right.
Yeah,
all that stuff.
I particularly recommend that to people because it feels completely right, because there's the rumble of the trains overhead almost.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. And it's in the real world.
Yeah.
It's in that everyday real world that we were talking about with Lynch.
Yeah.
That of course it's there. Where else would it be?
Yeah.
Where is the numinous? It's here. It's now. If it's not here now, then it's nowhere. It has to be. It has to be here.
So how do you normally explain model agnosticism to people?
I guess how would I normally explain model agnosticism? It's the recognition that we don't have one great, unarguable model to explain everything, to explain every aspect of everything. And we have a bunch of competing models, some of which are good in these circumstances and some of which are good in other circumstances. And once you divorce a particular model from your being fundamental to your own identity and feel comfortable with using different models, even though they're contradictory on some levels, at different times and different places, you suddenly get such a broader and richer and more useful view on things than if you stick to one particular, belief system or philosophy. It's an awareness that there's 8 billion sort of people on this planet, and you will never ever meet anyone else who agrees with you exactly to the smallest detail on everything.
Yeah.
By the simple law of statistics, that's got to tell you something, that that the way, even though you think, no, I'm the one person who gets it, and everyone else is wrong. It's very easy to think that, but statistically, that's not the case. It's not the case. You just have to acknowledge that as your belief systems as flawed as everyone else's, and you must be riddled with sort of errors in your perceptions of how the world works, and being able to view it from as many different belief systems as possible, and trying to reconcile them in your mind.
Yeah.
Is surely the way forward.
And I think, and actually, you write quite well about this in the KLF book. You say that it's different to sort of that postmodern, everything's up for grabs, because they have different use functions within different cultures and contexts. So it's not just like every model is equal. It's more like, how useful is this?
It's not everything is equal. Every model is equal.
Yeah.
It's not that. It's like some are bollocks.
In these
circumstances, these are of no use whatsoever.
And also, I guess the fact that your one might also be bollocks at some point is not.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again with the Blake book, part of the reason for writing that was, as I say, Blake is so rich. He's so multifaceted. We're never going to completely. No one's going to really get him. But everyone who approaches him, whether you're interested in it on a political level or a sexual level or a religious level or an artistic level or whatever he's gonna talk back to you, and you're gonna sort of find things. Which means that people who have, a particular sort of niche theology will look at Blake and see that reflected back at themselves, and they'll be like, Blake proves that I'm right. And so they have to sort of protect their view of Blake, because it's a view of their own, it's their own belief system, really, that they're sort of. So these sort of, if someone has a sort of weird Christian fundamental, Christian spirituality is a common one. They see that in Blake. They think, I'm the only person who understands Blake because I get this, and anyone who takes a different view is wrong, and they're an attack on me. So I must put a stop to it. And it's a real shame, because Blake is much more welcoming if you sort of avoid that sort of thing. It's that the fundamentalist view that, no, I have the one right thing. And as I say, anyone who disagrees is therefore an attack. It's attacking me. They're attacking my belief system. So that's the thing to avoid. That's the beauty of multiple model agnosticism, is you don't fall, for that nonsense.
Your own bullshit, basically.
Yeah, you don't fall for your own bullshit.
Actually, when I was reading the Blake book, it was a few years ago now when it came out, wasn't it? And
2021, something like that.
Yeah, I was in Lambeth at the time, and so it was nice to be reading it while in Lambeth, because I also had no idea that most of where I was walking would have been fields at the time of Blake.
Yes,
which was quite nice.
There's that line in that is it Gilchrist's 1863 first biography of Blake, about how he would walk to the idyllic countryside of Croydon.
Yeah, that's it.
That's great.
Yeah. So something that Robert Anton Wilson used to talk about reality tunnels, that we're looking at things from the point of view of our own reality tunnel. And one way he would illustrate this actually is he'd say a group of people to come in, and then he'd say, please describe the hallway that you all just walked through. So each person would have a completely different description based on their own conditioning and experiences. And what Raw chose to do, and this is a repeated motif through his work, is around rabbits, around the bunny. He literally worked at Playboy magazine. And this thread of this sort of ridiculous but also meaningful thread of the rabbit and the bunny flows through to the KLF, with the Echo and the Bunnyman, which Bill Drummond was, had the record label for.
Absolutely.
And Raw consciously chose to. He was receiving contact. It could have been a drug-induced psychosis. It could have been many things, and he chose to interpret it as he was talking to a giant puka, a giant bunny rabbit, to not take it so seriously.
Absolutely, because he thought if he decided that it was a spirit guide or if it was it was an alien intelligence from Sirius, that he would take it seriously, and he'd fall for his own nonsense. But if he viewed it as a giant invisible rabbit spirit from County Derry, then there was no way he was going to take that seriously, and that kept him sane, I think, during some quite extreme psychological turbulence or whatever was going on inside that man's mind at the time. That the power of the silly is so important.
The
power of not being able to take yourself seriously because you get the joke, you can see the joke. So important, the cosmic joke.
Cosmic joke, the cosmic giggle factor, I think Discordians call it.
Exactly. I remember Daisy, Ken Campbell's daughter, Daisy Campbell, was doing this extreme, I don't know what you'd call it. It was a pilgrimage. It was a pilgrimage from CERN Abyss to the CERN Hadron, Large Hadron Collider, from CERN to CERN, from the Large Hadron to the Large Hadron. And she made people wear false teeth.
Right.
So they would automatically be ridiculous. So they wouldn't get too pompous and self-important and feel what they were doing so worthy or anything like that to make them all ridiculous. Powerful thing.
Very powerful. There's a Zen clown who was he's died now, Bernie Glassman. I don't know if you've ever come across him.
No, I don't think I have.
He was best friends with Jeff. Is it Jeff Lebowski, the dude? Sorry, no, Jeff Bridges.
Yeah.
Jeff Bridges. Sorry, Big Lebowski.
Okay. Yeah.
What he would do is he'd just pop on a little red nose when it got too serious, just to break the. But the bunny wasn't without precedent. There does seem to be, but I mean, I guess it's how you look at things. But there is.
Oh, I mean, whatever whatever you decide to look into, you will find is infinite. Whichever thing you choose.
Yeah.
If you explore it, you will just keep going. You will just sort of keep going. You will not come to an end, no matter what what aspect of the world you want to sort of pursue. So it's why avoiding paranoid, bleak, toxic worldviews is very important, because if you go down those routes, you're going to keep going.
Yeah.
Keep on.
Well, Robert Anton Wilson would often talk about winners' scripts. I don't think in a sort of Trumpian way of like be a winner, more in terms of our interpretive ways of relating to reality, because something the Discordians would use is the number 23, a big number. And as you just said, the more you look and for the number 23, it could be any number, but the more you look for it, the more you'll see that. And weirdly, as I was thinking about this interview yesterday, I'm walking along thinking about Alan Moore's idea space, thinking about magic. I was also sort of listening to an Adam Buxton podcast, and they're talking about David Blaine when he had the eye on his hand. I looked down at the train station and there's loads of playing cards. Someone's like just left playing cards everywhere. And I was like, whoa, weird synchronicity. But I used to be freaked out and a bit anxious by strange synchronicities.
Yeah.
The more you start recognizing them, the more they happen. But now I choose to interpret them positively. And so,
absolutely.
Do you think these experiences can say something about reality then when we have us?
I mean, when you sort of write the books I do, you can often be overwhelmed by them at times.
Right.
And all I do is just take them as a sign that I'm on the right path.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm on the right path. That's very good. Oh, that's ridiculous. That shouldn't happen, but that's happened. I must be on the right path. Good. And then sort of move on and not worry about it too much.
Yeah. Because Lynch was really into numbers as well, wasn't he? He was
very much so, numerology and all sorts of sort of non-rational ways of looking at the world. Very much so. Yeah, I love there's an interview from 1980 with Barry Norman on film. It was at Cannes, but it was for Film 80, if you remember that program. And
I remember Barry Norman,
Barry Norman interviewed Lynch, and at the end he goes, "Do you know your shoelace is undone?" And Lynch is like, "Yes, it's that's deliberate. Like about 3 months ago, I realised that my shoelace was undone, and I'd had a really good day. So I thought I better not tie that shoelace, till after can." And Barry Norman was like, "Have you tripped?" "Yes, a couple of times, but imagine things would be far worse if I did that up,
Yeah.
And then, he went on and won the Palme d'Or at Cannes, so it sort of did work.
Yeah.
It did. It proved itself to him on that sort of level, which is very funny.
So that kind of like magical thinking, I think something I liked in the KLF book actually is how you balance that with the opposite sort of objective materialism.
Yeah.
And so for those who haven't read the book, you have to read all of John Higgs, all of your work, John, but like the KLF book as well.
That's great advice.
It's really good stuff. The KLF burnt £1 million, and
They did.
it's fascinating because they didn't know why they did it. And do you think that the power of the act? I mean, I can't even. I was thinking about burning £5. I had a cash. And I was thinking yesterday, should I burn this to see what it feels like to negate money?
Yeah.
And I couldn't do it. I couldn't even burn a £5.
It's a fascinating thing. There's a huge scene around money burning. The Church of Bern. If you Google Church of Bern, you'll find a lot more about it. And it's seen as it's sacrifice. In pretty much every religious spiritual tradition, the sacrifice is of profound importance. But it's the only sort of morally acceptable sacrifice in that, if you sacrifice a goat, that's great for you. It's not so good for the goat. To burn your own money, to destroy something with no possibility of gaining anything in return, anything material in return, is it's the only sort of type of sacrifice that where you're sort of the actual victim. So it's the purest type of sacrifice.
Yes.
As they see it, and as they say, it has to be enough to sting. The choice of how much to burn. It just has to be a little. It just has to sting. It depends on how much money you have, what that level will be. But you sort of destroy something that hurts you as an act of. It's an act of forgiveness almost. That's what it feels like. There's something slightly humbling about it. It's a fascinating thing, yeah. But I kind of also need the money to buy food, so it's not something I pursue particularly. But
well, money is like one of the biggest collective reality tunnels that we have, right? It's not real, but it has function as an efficacy.
It's real because everyone agrees to behave as if it's real.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a piece of paper. But also, if we all agree to behave that it has this, believe that it has this value, then it has this value, and that's magical thinking. But that's how the economy works.
So, and as I was saying in the book, like there was the people on, we'll call it the objective materialist side, but like they're a bunch of attention-seeking arseholes when they burnt the money.
The KLF,
yes, and
yeah.
The magical thinking side said that this was the spirit of chaos that had been woven by the Discordians in a bowling alley in the 50s, which had carried through to this moment. And it brought on the 21st century. So do you think, so it's been 23 years since, and then they came back with the Day of the Dead, and they built the People's Pyramid. How do you think the band reflect on it now?
Oh, I mean, I'd hate to speak for them. I think they. I don't know. I'm not one to speak to them, but I'm not sure they could even answer that. Certainly, many people ask them.
Yes.
And they don't really get a proper answer. It's. I don't think if they could go back in time and undo it, they would. despite the sort of quite traumatic, impact it's had on them.
Yeah.
I still think they would, knowing what they know now, I still think they would still have burnt that money. But, you have to ask them.
Yeah. So just to sort of maybe draw things to a close is to bring it back to sort of, we're talking about metrics at the start. And so the KLF negated money by burning it. Is there an equivalent act that artists can do to negate the algorithmic identity, do you think?
I mean, if they can get off the socials.
Yeah.
It's tough, isn't it? There are aspects of the online world that that are useful and good. I mean, Google Maps.
Oh,
is a Wikipedia, an email. These things are very important. Bandcamp and Substack are keeping a lot of creative people going, and connecting people. So there are things of value in that world, but it's sort of realizing what isn't. What is destructive, what is sort of toxic. I always wonder if, say, when Twitter was launched, if it had launched without those little numbers at the bottom of each tweet saying how many retweets, how many likes, and things like that. If it existed without those from the start, so people couldn't gamify it in any way, and people would just use it to communicate, how much of a better world that would have been if that was the system.
Yeah. Well, John, thanks so much for chatting with me today. It's been really enjoyable.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Mark. It's really nice to see you after all these years from that Whitstable Labour Club room.
Yeah. So we can follow you, I guess, on Substack now, and
yeah, I do. I mean, if you go, I'm on johnhiggs.com. I've got a website, but I do a Substack, and there's the regular Substack is just a free thing, but if people pay for these New Moon letters, they also get a book in the post every summer. This collection called the Midsummer Annual, which I've just put this year's together one, and it's been such a joy to do. Having spent years in the having my books traditionally published, to sort of go back and do this indie sort of scrabbling, putting it together sort of thing. You can have such fun with it. I'm really enjoying that.
All right. Well, thanks very much, John. I appreciate it a lot.
Pleasure. Thanks, Mark.
That's it for this week's podcast. Huge thanks to John Higgs. We're very lucky to have him in Britain, one of the best writers we've got on the mystery. So do check out all of his work. I'll put some links in the show notes to his website and stuff like that. Also want a big thanks to everyone who supports the podcast. Please do share, subscribe, recommend it to people. We want to get it out there, get more numbers on this thing, more metrics. We need more metrics. No, those who are listening, we do appreciate it. And as I said, if you want to support us, you can do so financially at patreon.com/the Bardo podcast. If you'd like to also learn a little bit more about Robert Anton Wilson after this conversation, go back and check out episode 5 with Gabriel Kennedy. We're going to have another episode with him as well coming up shortly. We've already recorded that. And you can find out about comedy, meditation groups, and everything else I'm up to at marcsalmoncomedy.com. That's it. Until next time, try not to fall for your own bullshit. We'll see you in the in-between. Have a good one.